we're going to work through applications of per capita and proportions here in this video. Now, for this first problem, we've got a fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2015. Canada had receipts, that's income, of $282.3 billion and expenses, right, money that went out, of $280.4 billion. Did Canada have a surplus or a deficit? Well, they were bringing in more, right, more income. $282.3 billion is more than $280.4 billion. So this is a surplus. That's a good thing when you got more money coming in than going out. And the second one is how much more. So if we subtract these two, we end up with $1.9 billion surplus. That's large. That's a large surplus. Number two, the U.S. government estimates that its receipts, that's how much money coming in, will total $4,705.7 billion for the year 2021. If the U.S. government aimed for a balanced budget in 2021, how much money should the government allocate towards expenses? Now, it is my impression that a balanced budget means that expenses equal the receipts, right? The money coming in is the same as the money going out. So if we want a balanced budget, then we need to shoot for $4,705.7 billion for expenses, because that's how much we're going to take in. So we gotta keep it the same, balanced budget. Individuals also have these issues, not just countries. Consider the scenario that your income last January totaled $25,43.65 and your expenses were $27,53.74. Right? We all have these months. Did you have a surplus or a deficit? Well, you spent 27 some, you took in 25. You have a deficit. How much? Well, if I take my $27,53.74, that's my expenses, how much I paid, and I only brought in $25,43.65, the difference of that is $210.09. So you had to dig into your savings account for that month. The next couple of problems, we are going to use this table. First, number 4, looking at 2014. 2014 is here, surplus or deficit. So this one is the income, this one is the expenses. They're both in millions of dollars. Now it's easy to see that the expenses is more, so we have a deficit. How much? Well, if I subtract, right, and I'm not going to write all of these out, but basically to find how much you subtract. So when I subtract these, I find out that I have a deficit of $484,602 million. You got to add the word million because all of these are in millions of dollars. So you would do 6 decimal places to the right if you want to find the total answer there, like in standard form. And number 5, is there a projected surplus or deficit for 16 and 17? And estimate how much. Well, 16 and 17 are down here. You can see for both of these, the expenses are more. So for both of them, we expect a deficit. And how much? Well, so for each one, you would subtract, right? Biggest number minus the smallest. So in 2016, we have a deficit of $615,805 million. And in 2017, we expect a deficit of $503,482 million. And that is big expected deficits for those years. Now in number 6, find one year in the chart where there was a surplus. So we're looking for the one year where the receipts were bigger, and that is the year 2000, the year I graduated from high school. So for number 6, the year 2000 had a surplus, and if we subtract those two to find the difference, it was $236,241 million surplus in the year 2000. Okay, and we're going to need this table for the next problems too, but I didn't copy it over, so we might have to flip back and forth. So number 7, one interesting way to put a deficit into perspective is to look at the per capita deficit. So this is how, how much each person in the U.S. would have to pay if we wanted to wipe out the deficit together. So first we're going to figure out 2010, where the population was 309 million. So if we go back to 2010, and we've got to figure out deficit per capita. So the first thing that's to do is figure out the deficit. So if we have to subtract these two numbers to find the deficit for 2010. So when I subtract biggest number minus the smallest, I get a deficit of 1294373, and that's million. And I'm going to divide by the population, which they gave me to be 309 million. Now the millions cancel out, and when I divide those, I end up with $4,188.91. If each person in 2010 would have paid that much to the government, we would have wiped out the deficit. Okay, now let's look at 2014. 2014, we actually found the deficit here, but same concept, right? Find the difference between. So answer to number 4 is the start for 2014. The deficit in 2014 was 484,602 million, and they tell us the population was 319 million. Again, the millions cancel out. When I divide, I get, that's a bad color, I get $1,519.13. So you can see in 4 years the deficit changed, well, the population also changed, but now just a little over $1,500 would wipe out the deficit for that year. All right, we can also kind of do a comparison. I like to call these what-if problems. So we're going to go back to 2010, and we're going to kind of compare if an Indiana citizen spent money like the U.S. government, how would that have an effect? So first, let's come up with a U.S. expense ratio here. So expenses on the top, receipts on the bottom for 2010. And again, I'm getting these from this table. So 2010, we're going to use these numbers. Okay, this is where I'm getting it from. We're going to put expenses on top, so this number's going to go on top, and then receipts on the bottom. So I've got 3457079 over 2162706. Now I don't need the word millions because they would just cancel out, so I'm good. Now they told us in this problem if the average U.S. Indiana citizen has an income of 34028. Now income goes on the bottom, so 34028. And we spent money like the American government, how much expenses would we have? So remember, to solve proportions, we're going to cross multiply and divide. And when we cross multiply, we multiply these two numbers together first, and we end up dividing by the 2162706, and we end up with $54,393.66. So this is saying the $34,000 is how much you're taking in. That's your income for a year. If you were like the U.S. government, you would spend more than $20,000 more than you brought in a year. That is not good financial practice. Let's do this again for 2006. If an Indiana citizen with an income of $32,667 in 2006 had income and expenses that were proportional to the U.S. government, how much would the expense of the Indiana citizen have? Okay, so we're going to go back to that table. There we go. And we're going to look at 2006. So these are the numbers we're going to use now. Expenses over income. Okay. So again, I'm going to put expenses on top, income on the bottom. So for the U.S. government, I've got 2655050 for expenses and 2406869 for income. For the average, the Indiana citizen has the income of 32667, and we're trying to find the expenses. So once again, we're multiplying these two numbers. We end up dividing by the 2406, and I have an expenses of $36,035.41. So you can see that one's not too bad. That's a difference of just like $3,400. You're still spending more than you have, but it's not nearly as bad as what it was in the last problem. And I believe that is the last one on this video.